So, picture this. A man walks into an office, commits a truly brutal murder in the middle of the day, and then admits he did it. Case closed, right? Well, not even close. This is the story of a crime where the killer was never a mystery, but the legal battle that followed called everything about his mind into question.
The facts of the crime itself are just chillingly straightforward. It's the middle of a workday afternoon. Inside a government office in Pampanga, Philippines, Mrs. Belene Macalino Sigua is attacked and killed. There was absolutely no doubt about who did it. And that's really the heart of this entire thing. If the attacker freely admits, yes, I did it, what's left for a court to even decide? Well, in this case, pretty much everything. The fight wasn't about the physical act, it was about the sanity of the man who committed it.
Okay, so before we dive into the really complex stuff, what was going on in his head, let's just nail down the foundation of the case. These are the parts that no one, not the prosecution, not the defense, ever disagreed on.
Here are the cold, hard facts. The perpetrator, Rosalino Dungo. The victim, Mrs. Sigua. The place, her office. The weapon was a knife. And get this, he had brought it with him, hidden inside an envelope. He walked up to her, they had a brief conversation, and then he attacked. These facts were never, ever in question.
So, with the what happened completely locked down, the entire case pivoted to the why. Dungo's defense wasn't, I didn't do it. His defense was, I wasn't in my right mind when I did it.
And this is our first real peek into his state of mind. When his wife asked him why, this was his bizarre answer. He said that killing the victim was the only cure for a cancer in his heart. He actually said that if he didn't do it, he himself would die. I mean, this is not the response of a typical criminal.
And you know, what's so important here is that this wasn't some sudden snap. The defense started to build a timeline, showing the slow, steady mental deterioration. Dungo had been a farmer, then a welder in Saudi Arabia. But he had a stroke over there and had to come home early. And in the months right before the attack, his behavior just got more and more alarming.
His wife, Andrea, gave some incredibly powerful testimony. She painted this picture of a man who was just losing his grip on reality. He'd get lost in thought, he was cruel to his own kids, which was totally out of character, he was confused about money, he was even having these physical delusions, like claiming his head and feet were literally on fire. And the real bombshell? Doctors who examined him concluded he was psychotic, not just after the crime, but before and during it as well.
So the evidence seems pretty strong that Dungo was a deeply unwell man. But here is the absolute crux of the case. In the eyes of the law, is being mentally ill the same thing as being legally insane? That's the question the court had to answer.
To really understand the court's final decision, we have to get into the weeds a little bit and look at the very specific legal definition they had to use.
So this is the official definition, right from the law books. It's not just about having a mental illness. It's about that illness preventing you from having a full and clear understanding of what you're doing and what's going to happen because of it.
And over time, the courts have boiled that entire definition down to this one, incredibly high standard. To be found legally insane, the defense has to prove a complete deprivation of intelligence, right at the moment the crime happened. Not just impaired, not confused, complete. That is a massive mountain to climb.
And this just shows you the incredible uphill battle the defense was facing from day one. The law starts by assuming everyone is sane. It's not the prosecution's job to prove the killer was sane. It's up to the defense to prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, that he was insane. The burden is completely 100% on them.
So, now that we have that legal framework in place, that incredibly high bar of complete deprivation of intelligence, let's look at how the prosecution systematically picked apart the defense's arguments using Dungo's own actions against him. So the defense claimed Dungo was acting on some wild delusion, but the prosecution brought in the victim's husband, who testified that just a few weeks before the murder, Dungo came to his house and rationally complained about paperwork delays at his wife's office. Now that suggests a real-world motive, not a random psychotic break. The defense tried to paint this as an uncontrollable impulse, but the prosecution pointed to one simple but totally damning fact. He hid the knife in an envelope. I mean, that act of concealment doesn't scream mindless frenzy. It screams planning. It suggests he was consciously aware that what he was about to do needed to be hidden from view. The defense claimed Dungo had no idea what he'd just done. But what did the prosecution show? That after the stabbing, Dungo fled. He didn't just wander off. He traveled all the way to Metro Manila, where he was finally arrested. Fleeing the scene is the classic action of someone who knows they've done something wrong and is trying to escape the consequences.
But honestly, the most devastating blow to the defense came from their own star witness. On the stand, Dr. Echevaz, one of the mental health experts, was asked about the fact that Dungo shouted, "I killed Mrs. Sigua," right after the attack, and the doctor had to admit it. He said, "Your Honor, awareness is there." That statement right there proved awareness. At that moment, Dungo knew who he killed and what he had done.
So the court was left with these two competing pictures, a man who was medically diagnosed as psychotic and a man whose actions before, during, and after the crime all pointed to awareness and intent. So how did they make the final call?
The court really just followed a clear, logical path. First, they start with the presumption of sanity. Second, they decided that while the defense proved Dungo's mentally ill, they did not prove he had a complete deprivation of intelligence. They didn't clear that super high bar. Third, hiding the weapon showed planning. Fourth, fleeing the scene showed he knew his act was wrong. And so, the conclusion was inescapable. His actions just didn't meet the high legal standard for insanity.
And so, the final verdict came down: guilty. Despite all the clear evidence of his mental illness, the court found that Rosalino Dungo had failed to prove legal insanity. He was found guilty of murder and sentenced to reclusion perpetua, which is a term for life imprisonment in the Philippines.
In its final decision, the court included this really powerful statement. It's a reminder of the public policy behind this whole thing. The law is designed to make the insanity defense a very difficult shield to use, precisely to stop it from becoming a loophole for people who are sane enough to know right from wrong.
And that leaves us with the central tension of this whole case. Rosalino Dungo was almost certainly a man with a broken mind. But the law demands a very specific kind of brokenness, a complete shattering of awareness. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How do you prove that a mind has crossed a line that the law itself can barely even define?